The British Chamber of Commerce in China says most of its members are hoping for a thaw in China-US relations. And despite ongoing uncertainty, many British businesses aren't planning to scale back their investment in China. In this episode of the Leaders' Lounge, CGTN's Paul Barber spoke to the Chamber's chairman, Chris Torrens, to discuss their assessment of China's business environment.
So the position paper this year, it's in its 7th year of publication, so we've been following the mood and the sentiment of our members over those 7 years since 2019. And while the general feeling is still that China, I think for the 5th year, has been becoming a tougher environment to work in, or a more complicated environment to work in, we also note that the members that we talk to are not planning to reduce their investment in any way. In many cases, they're actually increasing investment or holding their investment. So that tells us, there's a bit of a contradiction there. It tells us, on the one hand, yes, things are difficult in China, and that's not just market access, that's also the economy and perhaps some geopolitical challenges. But it also says that China is a market that they can't afford not to be in, and that they see huge benefits there, both in terms of manufacturing but also as a consumer market as well. And I think our members overall feel that the trajectory of the UK-China relationship is also on their side. So I think there's we felt quite positive actually when we got those readouts from our members, and we feel it's going in the right direction.
Now, the resumption of high-level dialogues, including the UK-China Economic Financial Dialogue, the EFD, clearly a really important development for those platforms. What new trade opportunities do you foresee?
So it was great to see the EFD back on the agenda. Obviously, it's helped to maintain the momentum that we've seen from the UK government under this new administration since Foreign Secretary David Lammy's visit in the autumn, and then the meeting between Prime Minister Starmer and President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of Rio in December, and then with the Chancellor Rachel Reeves' visit and the EFD, again, that was a really important milestone, I think, in terms of maintaining this momentum. And within the position paper, we note that some 29 of the 50 overall recommendations that we've made to the Chinese government on behalf of our members, 29 of those recommendations were actually addressed. And I think there are a number of key areas where we're quite positive. Less on the financial side, although obviously some progress was made there, but in areas like sport, we work with the Premier League, who have launched in China recently. Football, soccer is a massively popular sport in China. I think the upper echelons of the Chinese leadership would love to see China succeeding again. And so that is, I think, a really interesting part of UK exports.
Despite the challenges, the paper suggests that China is, of course, a really crucial market for British businesses, and you've touched on the enduring commitment to the Chinese market. What sectors in particular are you excited about, which show the most promise for foreign investment, especially for British companies?
I think healthcare is probably one we'd call out, in part because obviously China's a huge market, and as China's population have developed, they have sadly started to suffer from many of the ailments that the Western world and more developed economies deal with. So pharmaceutical companies, GSK, AstraZeneca obviously has made some significant investment there, but also from a technological perspective, from a medtech perspective, the startups that we're seeing in China, some of the IP that's being developed here, the innovation, the creativity on the Chinese side, that really raises the potential of globalizing that kind of technology. So we're seeing UK healthcare companies coming in for the Chinese market and to benefit from the consumer market, but also to take advantage of some of that innovation and those startups. And those technologies and those services, they can then globalize, take them beyond China back to the West.
And your position paper does outline the frictions, the US-China frictions that British businesses are exposed to. How are they positioning themselves to de-risk that?
It's really difficult. It's a very good question. It's very difficult to de-risk in a world that's just so interconnected, and it's extremely difficult for many of our members who may be manufacturing in China but having US inputs, or they may have Chinese inputs into products and services which ultimately end up in the US. So we found that UK companies have been wrapped up in that, and so de-risking, or at least trying to mitigate that risk to an extent, has been a priority for many of our members, and they're doing that by setting up alternative production sites and manufacturing, but also I think by just hoping perhaps and waiting for more positive change in terms of the US-China relationship.
And finally, Chris, if you could deliver one message to policymakers here in Britain but also in China, what would that message be on behalf of the British businesses that you represent?
I think it would be, let's keep the senior engagement going, because those senior engagement events are what move the dial in terms of actual policy decisions. So let's resume the people-to-people exchange that we have, and let's try to rebuild trust based on that person-to-person exchange. I think that would be my key message to both governments.